Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It is Monday, December 16th, 2024, a couple minutes after 3 o'clock, and I call this meeting to order. We not only have a quorum on this virtual meeting, we have a unanimous board. The first thing on our agenda is for us to convene as the Board of Canvassers, for which we also have a unanimous board and a quorum present. And Boris, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. The first item on the agenda for the staff is to propose to the board to reject untimely received ballots for the 2024 presidential general election. Today, the staff will present a total of 94 ballots to the board for rejection. When it comes to domestic ballots, we have 19 ballots that were sent late and received late, and we have 4 that were sent timely but received late. When it comes to overseas ballot, the total is 59. We have 19 that are sent late and received late in the office, and we have 40 that are timely sent but received late in the office by the staff. That gives us 35 domestic total and 59 overseas so-called Yokawa ballots that staff proposes to the board to reject as untimely today.
Before we continue, let me just make sure we clarify. When you say they were sent late, you mean they were sent late by the voter. You're not suggesting that the ballots were sent late to the voters.
By the voter. They were sent by the voter late after the election day and received late.
Okay. And when you say that something was sent late, that's based on the postmark being after election day, or the signature, or how else are we determining that?
2 ways. If there's a postmark, that's the first one. If there is no postmark, we determine by the signature.
Okay. So it's basically the same rules that we've been operating under. And when you say sent late, that just means that, because obviously everything in our category right now is received late, because we already concluded the canvass. But what you're telling us, if I understand, Boris, is that a number of the ballots were would have been untimely even if they were received earlier.
That's correct.
All of them are being proposed as being untimely because of when we received them, but many of them would have been timely if they had been received earlier. Is there a motion?
Yeah, Mr. President, I move we reject these ballots as being untimely.
I will
Okay.
second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, raise your hands. Actually, Kina, you can, Kina did it. Excellent. Thank you, Kina. Okay. Kina did it electronically. The record will show that all of us unanimously voted to reject the untimely ballots. Now we have the canvass minutes. Boris.
Yeah. So very briefly, canvass minutes is the summary of our canvass for the 2024 presidential general election. It's a standard document with the standard segments in it. The staff introduced this time a table which indicates how many ballots we canvassed on each canvass day for the 2024 presidential general election. And I would like, out of all minutes, I would like to point out one item that I believe the board will touch upon in later discussion. And that's the issue that staff canvassed almost as many ballots before the election day as we canvassed in the whole 2024 primary election. And this is the result. This is of early return of the ballots by our voters. And this is what staff can do if the ballots are returned, if the mail-in ballots are returned early by our voters. We are in position to obviously canvass 70 to 80,000 ballots, I would say easily, if the board would agree with me this time around before the election day, and publish those results on the election night. which I believe it's in everyone's interest to have as many votes, as many results published on the election night as possible. So before the election day, only few canvass days, we still managed to canvass as many ballots as almost as for the 2024 primary election.
Let me just add to that, that I just looked very quickly on the state's website, and there are only 4 jurisdictions, including us, who canvassed more ballots than we canvassed before election day in total.
That's correct.
So out of 23 jurisdictions in Maryland, 19 of them canvassed fewer ballots than we canvassed in our 4 canvass sessions before election day. So that's just another example of how large our task was. And I know we're all going to have observations about the election, but one of them is that we got a lot done, and we had a lot to do. So anyway, thank you for that, Boris. Is there a motion on the canvas minutes? Ami.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the minutes as slightly edited by you.
No, this is, I don't believe I edited the canvas
Well, you
minutes.
didn't. All right. Well, then
Well, let me ask, did I edit the canvas minutes? Maybe I should ask Boris that question.
No.
Okay. I get confused as to which ones you edited and which ones you didn't, but I
Yes,
move we
thank you.
accept the minutes.
No
I
second.
second it.
Okay, before I go
Daniel.
on, let me just make sure that I'm right about what I did, but I don't think I edited the canvas minutes. No, it does not look like I did. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we approve the canvas minutes. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. It is unanimous. The canvas minutes are approved. Boris, is there any other business for the Board of Canvassers?
That will be all for today.
Okay, yes, I realize that every meeting we will probably have more untimely ballots. That is something that I want to make sure the public is taking note of, which is that although the election, I would argue, is over once we certify the results, which we did on the 27th of November, and which the state did on December the 5th, that we will continue to receive untimely ballots for some time. We do not necessarily have an explanation for that as to why. Some of it might be on the voters, some of it might be on the Postal Service, some of it, some of it just defies explanation. But we will continue, obviously. We cannot accept any ballots because by law, we can only accept them until the 10th day after Election Day. If they were received after that, we are required to reject them. Okay, the Board of Canvassers is adjourned. I now call to order the Board of Elections. We have once again I believe we have our full complement of board members. Although as I'm looking now, I am no longer seeing Kina. Can anyone see her?
No.
Okay. Jerry, please be on the lookout in case she's gonna come back, which I suspect she will. So at the moment we have 6 of the 7 of us. The first item on the agenda is the board president's comments. I'm going to keep my comments relatively short today compared to my norm, but I will just say that I'm very impressed by what our board and our staff accomplished in the 2024 general election. And even more importantly, everywhere I go, I'm getting congratulations from people as to how well it went. And that includes elected officials. It includes just county residents. I had someone, I went to an event yesterday when somebody said, congratulations. I said, what are you congratulating me on? And the answer was on how well the election went. So I have a standard response that I give when I get those congratulations, which is that I give credit to our election director and his staff, and to the high level of planning, data study, and and thought that went into just about every aspect of this election. But I just want to say that thank you for making all of us look good, you and us. I will continue to accept the congratulations on your all's behalf, but every time I do, I want you to know I am not saying it was all me. Not at all. It was all you guys. So thank you for that, and thank you, board members, because I know that juggling schedules around Canvas can be very challenging, and we managed to meet every time that we needed to meet. We managed to have the requisite numbers that we needed, and I don't think anyone has been fired from their outside, other jobs, etc. So anyway, I'm happy that we were able to do that. So that is all I have for comments at this point. Does anybody else have comments they want to make, keeping in mind that we're about to get to comments on the election for all of us? So you don't have to make those now, but do you have any general comments not about the 2024 election that you wanted to make? Okay, seeing none, are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Disclosure of campaign contributions or attendance at fundraisers. Does anybody have a campaign contribution or attendance at a fundraiser for a candidate or issue on our ballot to disclose at this time? Alex.
Mr. President, do we, and maybe Mr. Karpinski can remind me, do we have to disclose contributions to political clubs, that kind of thing? Or is it only the party itself, or only candidates?
My understanding is candidates and ballot questions, not parties and not clubs.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I have
And
nothing
not and not PACs. Do I have that right, Mr. Karpinski?
you do.
Okay. So with that clarification, I gather that there's no one who has anything to disclose today. So, okay, we're going to move on to board members' observations concerning the 2024 general election. I know that it now seems like that was ages ago, but I'm hoping that folks can remember the things that you observed as you were visiting early voting locations, visiting election day polling places, going through the canvas, dealing with the public, etc. And while I take as a given that, as I said, I've been getting congratulations from lots of people, none of that changes the fact that everything we do well, we can always do better. So if people have suggestions to make, happy to hear them. If people have things they want to compliment, happy to hear those too. The floor is open for comments. I can either go in any particular order you want, or I can just take volunteers. So how about if I just start by just taking volunteers? Anyone has observations they would like to make? If no one volunteers, I'll start making observations, but I'm guessing that others have observations to make. Alex.
I thought it went very well. I don't really have a lot of complaints. I think the only concerning thing was just the sheer number of provisional ballots that we had.
Right.
Not sure how we can try to discourage that in the future. But apart from that, I thought it went very smoothly. The staff was incredibly dedicated and hardworking. We were very efficient with our time, and I think we served the voters pretty well. So,
Yeah,
Thank you for
guess
that. Go ahead, Albie.
Mr. President, my only suggestion relates to Alex's comment on provisional ballots. I was horrified by the number of provisional ballots that came in. And I really think we need to do a better job of educating the public on how much time and trouble is involved with the provisional ballots and the mechanisms they can use to help smooth that part of the process. I'm not quite sure how to do it. I think the idea of voting center locations might help. I think the idea of more public comments on, please note your actual precinct voting site for election day rather than assuming it's the same as an early voting site. I think more public education might help a little. And I think we need to also do a little more education or support of the people at the actual precincts who are managing the provisional voting, particularly to avoid the provisional ballots that need to be rejected because things like the applications are not complete. That would help in not necessarily reducing the number of provisional ballots, but certainly in reducing the number that have to be rejected.
Thank you for that, Ami. I agree with everything you said. Let me just say that we're going to get later in the agenda to some of the proposed improvements of the process, some of which are designed to address that. One that I would like us to consider as relating to provisional ballots is a reminder to voters. If we can do it only for those who have not already voted, that would be wonderful. But if we did it to everybody, that wouldn't be terrible. A reminder to voters after early voting and before election day that if we could text every phone number we have that to say, if you vote on election day, go to your precinct. If you don't go to your precinct, you vote provisionally. If you vote provisionally, it'll take a lot more time. You may have to wait in line, et cetera. The balance with that is there are some voters out there who think that if you vote provisionally, your ballot will never be counted. And of course, we had 26,000 provisional ballots, and I think we counted 25,000 of them. So, so we obviously don't want people to think that if they vote provisionally, that means that their vote doesn't count. On the contrary, it just means it has to be researched, causes a lot of work for the voter, for the election, for the precinct workers, and for our staff and for us. But anyway, we will certainly get to that. But any other suggestions about ways to have fewer provisional ballots? I can't. I mean, it was a record number, and we definitely don't want to do that on a regular basis. And I'm sure the state will be looking into that question as well. Alex.
Mr. President, I think if there was a way to get a breakdown of the numbers of the reasons why people voted provisionally, not just why they were rejected, that might be helpful too. So,
yeah.
Now I know that the reasons they were rejected are in the Canvas minutes. I don't know about the reasons why they voted provisionally, but Boris has his hand up, so maybe he will have an answer for us.
Thank you, Dave. Alex, first for the whole board, for the January meeting, staff will prepare very thorough overview of the 2024 presidential election. And the big segment of our presentation will deal with the provisional ballots. Provisional ballots, or high number of provisional ballots, was not only Montgomery County issue this election, it was across the state. It was in every county. From when it comes to the major categories that generated provisional ballots, Alex, very briefly to answer your question, we are talking about voters who requested mail-in ballot but decided to vote in person, we are talking about voters who on election day went to the wrong polling place outside of their precinct. And we are talking, I would say, historic number of same-day registrations that took place in the county. And we had almost, from the top of my head, 4,800 or so voters who did same-day registration but did not have all the documents with them. So therefore, they had to vote provisional because they didn't have a driving license or Maryland ID to be pre-qualified. And then we had around 1,200 provisionals generated by voters who were outside of the county. Anyhow, more thorough, more detailed presentation will be included for the January board meeting when we will look at everything like we did after 2022 elections. So if you bear with me, we'll compile everything, maybe paint a much better picture and our understanding why some things happen this cycle.
Great, thank you, Boris.
I believe that Boris has a nickname now of Mr. Data. I think it's well earned and deserved, and I'm looking forward to benefiting from that at our January meeting. We already have a fair amount of data, but we're gonna have a lot more when people have time to study it, and I think that's going to be very, very helpful because we do have to have fewer provisional ballots, and the rest of the state does too. It'll be interesting to see also whether our reasons for provisional ballots are in similar proportion to the rest of the state, or whether Montgomery County has any differences with the rest of the state. Other observations, Margie, then Daniel.
Mine is more of a question, and if this is going to be answered in the presentation later, then we can just go through it and then move on to Daniel. But I guess my first question, I think you mentioned that a lot of the mail-in ballots were turned in earlier than in previous years, or that voters sent them in earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct. The volume that we received before the election day was higher.
Okay. And then I guess my follow-up question to that is, I know we had just a couple of instances of lines longer than would be ideal. Was that because voters waited a lot, like last minute to vote? Was that something that you noticed, or is this just kind of what happens in previous years?
Yeah, so a full answer for the first question is I will have a presentation of the absolute and relative numbers, because absolute number versus total requested is completely different story compared primary in general. When it comes to the wait times were not spread equally among 232 polling places on election day. They were concentrated on a handful of locations. Everyone is familiar with the Silver Spring, and they, to great extent, I believe, correlate to the high number of provisionals that were generated at those places. So addressing one item helps addressing another. So it's a reducing number of provisionals, also helps reduce the lines, also helps improve the voter experience at the polling place. And let's also be honest, it decreases the burden on the staff to process all those provisionals so we can send them to the canvass so the board of canvassers can approve them. It's one of those items that we always try to explain to everyone, that there is no singular effort in the board of election that doesn't have a domino effect prior or after in the whole administration of the election.
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Before I go to Daniel, let me just say, Boris, one of the ways that we might address the strong correlation between wait times and provisional ballots would be more provisional judges in some locations. So if Silver Spring had 3 provisional judges instead, I don't know how many they had, but let's just suppose that we tripled the number that they had, or if there are places that have particularly high numbers and we have reason to believe that the reasons that led to that are likely to continue. In Silver Spring's case, probably a number of people who go on their lunch hour because they work in Silver Spring, or something along those lines, that it might be helpful to, yes, we want to do everything we can to encourage people not to do that. So, you know, if it's on election day, vote in your home precinct. But we also might want to make it so that the provisional line is not as long, because that line in Silver Spring was pretty darn long.
I agree. There are a few caveats that I just have to emphasize. Number one, we do increase number of provisionals based on the trend that we see, and Silver Spring was a beneficiary of that increase. Number two is we are the county that does the highest number of outreach events in the state. We invest in outreach, we try to recruit, and you will see later in my report, we are already recruiting for 2026, the election judges. And yet we didn't have a surplus of election judges to dispatch to those locations. The board might, maybe I failed to inform the board earlier, our staff was trained to be election judges, and our staff was dispatched on election day to location. Sandy, our water services manager, took a couple of team members, and they spent the whole day in Silver Spring addressing provisional ballots. That's one angle. You know, it's some locations, Germantown, number of people at 8 o'clock that very line. We are talking about 200 plus people. We can talk about different explanations why it happened there. But again, everything is connected. We will strive definitely to have a surplus of election judges. We plan in that aspect. But if you don't mind waiting for January, you will learn, for example, that 2 weeks before the election day, we had 239 election judges who called us and said that they were not serving. And that is a big number. 239 we cannot supplement in that short period of time, because training is coming to an end. We were full, and I don't know how many of them were provisionals from the top of my head, but that's a trend that we always experience, so-called the dropout right before the election day.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Boris, I think we're going in the right direction, because it seems like we need to spend more time in really not only looking at the data, but also probably developing some, some plans that could really help. So I in my, hypothesis, I'm thinking the domino effect really starts from the mail-in ballots, right? So because that could lead to provisional voting, that could also, of course, lead to wait line. So that being said, I just want to make sure like, what are the percentage? I know more mail-in ballots came in early, but what percentage were not returned? And then while we're building a strategy around provisional ballot, but let's go one step back, which is how do we make sure within that strategy that we're able to get the word out, and we're doing a phenomenal work when it comes to that, in making sure people realize that, as Mr. President will always say, we're not telling anyone to vote early, but vote as soon as you get your ballot, because I believe between the end of early voting and election day, there were approximately 70,000 mail-in ballots that were not returned. So I hope the data can really speak to how many were returned within that 1 week period. But also, as we talk about reducing line, which is the ultimate, effect we want to have, and then how do we make sure that the mail-in ballots, we have an increase there, or what strategy we can put in place to have an increase there, which could also reduce the provisional ballots. So, but thank you overall for, the work that you did, and the staff was just phenomenal. Everyone else, I say, I went to many of the, the locations, and it was just phenomenal. People came out to vote, and in many of these places, we had, I don't want to say adequate staffing, but the lines will go down as fast as they were forming. So thank you for that, Boris.
Okay, Boris, and then Diane.
Just very briefly, Daniel, you are spot on, and something that I mentioned when Margie asked her question. The difference between absolute and relative numbers, it's something to be considered. Also, number against expected turnout between the primary and general. The number against received requests for mail-in ballots versus returned. Vote by mail, that's web delivery. Just for the sake of this argument, we had as many requests for the web deliveries that everyone knows are the hardest one to receive because everything is hand processed, and we definitely next time need more staff to speed that up. Our number of requests was as many as PG County and Baltimore County combined. And we pulled it off. It was not easy, and I don't think that our staff would like to do it the same way next time around, but these are Montgomery County numbers, and these are the numbers that play a big role. When we come to January, I will present to the board that every we call them code 4. Every voter who requested mail-in ballot but showed up in person, we actually asked them to fill out the form to say why did they show up in person. And you will see that of those who answered the question, roughly equal distribution of 4,800 voters who claimed that they never received their mail-in ballot, but also the same number of a bit under 5,000 who said, yeah, I got my ballot, but I decided to vote in person. So that is almost 5,000 provisionals of people who changed their mind. And I believe that them having experience of 2024 general, waiting in long line to vote provisional, it's maybe an incentive to reconsider whether to return mail-in ballot for the 2026 or not to request mail-in ballot, just vote the regular ballot without, skipping the provisional line. The issue remains. I didn't check for a week now, but I believe that we have 125,000 permanent mail-in ballot requests, and we will see how that number fluctuates going forward.
Thank you, Boris. I just want to point out that, as I understand it, we had about 25,000 web-delivered printed home ballots. And that is more ballots than the total number of ballots, not just web delivered, but all ballots in 15 counties in Maryland. So, and that's just our web delivered. The only other thing I was going to add, Boris, as you and I have talked about, but I want to say it publicly and to my colleagues, I would like to do a sampling of the people who said that they did not receive their mail-in ballots. I'd like to ask them to check their email inboxes to see. I'd like to ask them more directly, is it that you can't find, couldn't find it, et cetera. I do not consider it at all to be impossible that they didn't get their didn't get their ballot in the mail, but I would like to get a sense of that, because I have no doubt that there are people who change their mind. I also have no doubt there are people who lose it. And I would certainly be capable of being one of those people, although I didn't vote by mail-in ballot this time, so it wasn't me this time. But I do want to look at, whether there is a problem with the state's vendor sending out the ballots, and and kind of if some of them are really not getting there, because if that's contributing to the number of provisional ballots, and the fact that there was this problem across the state does at least raise that question. I would definitely want to look into that. Okay, Diane.
Oh, I guess I'm on. Okay. This may not be the right time, but just so I don't forget, I've been hearing things from people since the election, just anecdotes, experiences that happened to them. Some of these, and they're training issues for judges. When's the appropriate time to bring those up? Or
that depends. Are you talking about bringing up specific incidents at specific polling places? In which case I would say you should send those to Boris.
Okay.
So that he can look into what actually happened. If you're talking about a general problem that goes across polling places, then I would say this is the appropriate time, because we'd like to know if we have a generalized issue.
Okay,
But if it's a, you know, if it's a, this election judge did this thing wrong, or someone thinks that, or someone thinks that a particular machine didn't operate properly, we get those with, you know, Boris
Okay.
checks them out. And you know, if it's an individual issue, I think that would be the best way to handle it.
Okay, great. I will send the individual to Boris. I only
Thank
have
you.
one that I think could be system-wide, if we call our process system-wide, all of our locations. And Boris took
Mhm.
care of the, Boris happened to be present the evening that we did take care of something. And it's something that I brought up in past elections. And that's when people check in and they don't do it individually. And friends go together and you've got, I think that as a training matter for judges, I would like to see amplified or amplified, reiterated, that when people come to vote, it's a singular exercise, that you don't go through it with a friend or a family as a group. I think for a lot of different reasons.
Just to clarify, you're not referring to people who require assistance.
Correct.
You
I'm
are
not.
referring, what you're saying is that if you and I go to the polls together, you don't want me to answer the question about where you live or what your birthday is, even though
Right.
I believe you,
Or
Diane, I know when your birthday is. But
thank you. Likewise.
yes, but
Or
but
to go, yeah, to go
yeah,
together to the same check and judge and just, you know, it's not an outing. And Boris did an exemplary job, but I just wanted to bring that up because I think it is something that I've seen in the past that I think is, if just is specified a little more during the training. I know there's an awful lot of training that goes on, but that's the end of my comment. Thank you. And
okay.
Boris is an excellent.
I'm gonna call on Boris in a second, but let me just say I disagree with it's not an outing. I think it is an outing for many people. I think a lot of families want to vote together. I think a lot of friends want to vote together. But there's a difference between going to the polls together and checking in together.
Correct.
And when we talk about checking in together, Diane, I'm with you. Okay. If we're talking about, you know, if I'm checking in, um, I should be able to answer if there's not a language barrier, if there's not a disability barrier, you know, et cetera. I'm with you. But if you're saying don't make it an outing with my wife and kids, I would say why not?
I,
You know,
I think
and yeah, go ahead,
as
Diane.
a civic, um, not only responsibility, but it's a gift. Um, I go with my family. I've gone with friends, and we are on the same page.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that when you talked
Yeah.
about it not being an outing, that because I also see a lot of parents bringing young children in order for them to understand how important it is, and in order for them to see how the process works from a very young age, and to develop habits, et cetera, which I think is very positive for all. So anyway, okay, Boris.
Uh, Very briefly, it has been outing and it will remain outing in Montgomery County. Friends, families go together. Standing in line together, it's not an issue. And I believe, Diane, we spoke about this, and it is one of the examples of across the board training issue that we have to emphasize. Family or group standing in line, you know, spending some time while they are waiting to get to the check-in judge, it's absolutely fine. Check-in judge, voting booth, one person at a time. Simple rule as it gets. And when it just last remark, when it comes whether it's voting in Montgomery County, is it outing for family and friends? We overlapped with the Halloween this year, and it was definitely outing before and after. And I don't know if the board noticed there was a plenty of sugar running around, so it was an issue.
Not
Yeah,
only
that it
sugar,
was a
there were costumes as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
it was a poor choice of words for me, but I'm glad to see we are all in unison on this. Thank you.
Okay. Kina, did you have anything you wanted to comment on? I think you're the only one other than I who has not yet gone.
No, Mr. President, I'm withholding my comments at this time until we are all able to read the presentation, but thank you.
Okay, yes, no one is precluded from commenting after we get Boris's data in January. In fact, I'm quite sure that the data will provoke commentary from all of us, and I hope it does, because that's the whole purpose. I will say that one of the most memorable presentations of my time on the board, and one that I'm very proud of because I requested it. I didn't do the presentation, I just asked for the presentation, was a presentation on wait times that was done in January of 2019 after the 2018 election. The 2018 election was the one that had extraordinarily long lines on election day at the Praisner Center where people had 2-hour waits. We got a presentation on there were the Dirty Dozen precincts that had the worst wait times. But we also got a map of the entire county with the idea of what was the worst wait, the peak wait time in each precinct, which gave us a good sense as to what Boris just told us about how it's not evenly distributed everywhere, that there are some places that have there were some patterns and some non-patterns. I mean, it wasn't that it was all in one place, but whatever the case, I thought that was really valuable. I thought it was a valuable tool for targeting resources. I am looking forward to Boris's January 2025 presentation with, hoping that we're going to get not only interesting data, but actionable data so that we can do something with it. I do want to underscore how I started, which is that I think it was a great election. I think that it was very well administered. I am particularly proud of our transparency among the few things that didn't go according to plan. And I think that the fact that we were as transparent as we were and explaining to people and answering questions and issuing press releases and finding our own mistakes in some cases and not freaking out when other people found mistakes, because that's kind of the way the process works. I think all of that contributed to the fact of the general perception that we had an excellent election, because those human bumps in the road, which every election has, are not as big a deal when we're open about them and when we get the true facts out and when we knock down the speculation. When things go wrong, people immediately look for political motivations or other motivations or whatever, when usually it's just a mistake. I was very proud of how we handled our mistakes. I would love to say that we're not going to have mistakes in the future, but I also know that we're all human beings, and I personally cannot make that representation for myself, so I wouldn't expect anyone else to be able to say we're not going to have any more mistakes. But I'm very proud of the way we handled them. And I appreciate everybody's cooperation in that. Diane.
Yeah, apologies, everyone. I'm going to make this really quick. I don't want to, make this longer, but I just want, because part of the process is a canvas, I just have to thank Boris, everybody else. I am absolutely thrilled by the fact that every single canvas day, those tables were full. And we had such, I cannot congratulate you enough and give enough thanks to everybody who put that team together to keep us fully functional, top level. It's the only way we were able to get done before Thanksgiving, and I think it's nothing short of a miracle. So I just needed to throw that in. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know that I want to get into a discussion of whether it was a miracle or not, but I would say that
Sort of.
I'll put it this way. We'll have that discussion offline. we'll separate church and state for that purpose. But Boris, please proceed.
Just very briefly, the board will know that in 2022, we made some extra effort to expand the pool of canvassers. That effort continued this year, and having tables packed and having party distribution to pack those tables, which is not always the easiest task. It's Jan, Michelle, Sandy, the voter services team that was working on that all the time between the canvas days.
And let me say that Michelle is quite the recruiter, as you all know. If someone comes to visit Canvas, they are immediately asked, "Would you like to be a canvasser?" Because if they expressed enough interest to come to Canvas, they are potentially a canvasser. Great credit. I agree with everything Diane said. Let me also add, though, that a lot of work took place that we didn't see from the staff that was researching the provisional ballots, which was basically, if I understand correctly, I mean, I know it was under Lolita's leadership, but it was basically everybody who wasn't at Canvas was doing, or almost everybody was doing research on provisional ballots. And they had a particularly large volume and hard job this election. So I want to recognize them as well for getting all of that done in a timely way, because we also would not have been done before Thanksgiving if that work had not been done in a timely fashion. So anyway, okay. Any other observations? Kevin, did you want to make any observations about the election?
I think you covered pretty much everything. Obviously, the number of provisional ballots is a concern. It's, every time you interject a new way or other ways to vote, there are checks and balances that need to be put in place. So obviously, I think there needs to be an emphasis on educating voters that when you select a particular way to vote, particularly vote by mail, that it's you're not going to be able to just go into your polling place and vote, at least not be able to vote anything other than a provisional ballot. So I think that is something that I'm sure a great emphasis will be put on moving forward.
You know, you are reminding me, Kevin, that in federal appropriations law, there is a concept called pick and stick, which means in that case that if you have a particular purpose for spending money, that the money should be spent for that purpose, and you stick with that. But maybe we have to use that phrase for how people choose to vote, which is to encourage people to pick and stick. Because really, about a third of our voters are voting by mail, about a third of in the 2024 general election, I'm not talking about the primary, was a whole different animal, but in the general election, slightly more than a third voted on election day. But roughly it was a third between mail-in balloting, early voting, and election day. And I suspect that for high turnout elections, it'll be in that, we're going to have people choosing each of the above for different reasons. But we might want to encourage people to pick and stick, so that we have fewer provisional ballots. Now, if they pick early voting and then decide to vote on election day, as long as they go to their polling place, it's not really an issue. But whatever the case. Okay, Daniel.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'll just say my observation during my visit. Seems like when there's excitement about a candidate, an election cycle, that usually will, because that's what I observe. There are people who basically was like, no, I want to make sure my vote counts now. And so therefore they came in. So the few observations that I made during, the time I volunteered and as I saw people in the provisional ballot line. So, I think as you're suggesting, because just to make sure for the good of the public, we're not limiting people's ability to choose.
Not at all.
There you go.
Not at all.
I just want to make sure.
Not at all. And quite frankly, if someone requested a mail-in ballot, doesn't vote it, goes to the polls and votes provisional, their provisional will be counted.
Thank you. That's good.
You know, but I think their experience will be better, and ours will be too. But that's not as important, you know, for this purpose. Their experience will be better if they choose their method. If they do not trust that their mail-in ballot has been received and will be counted, or that it will arrive on time, or, you know, anything along those lines, they might not want to vote by mail-in ballot because, you know, until the board as an entity wins the lottery and is able to staff to, you know, the levels of, you know, as many people as we'd like, is always going to be competing things going on. I mean, think about all the things that we and our staff are doing in just the weeks leading up to election day, between early canvass, well, voter registration deadline ending, and those voter registrations have to be processed, early canvass, early voting, preparing for election day. There's a lot that needs to be done at once during that time period. So it's not always going to be the case, and I know that Boris has correctly prioritized getting ballots out to people who request them as being the most urgent, so that they have time to complete them and send them back. Anyway, it's hard to get everything done at once. And so to the extent that people do pick and stick, I think they will have a better experience, but it's not a requirement. It is, you know, it is, I would call that something that would be a preference, but in any event, but thank you for that clarification. Diane.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to try to make this quick. I hate to belabor it. To move on to the next agenda item, but on the pick and stick, and I agree with Daniel completely. Is there some way, perhaps, my question is premised on the idea of the permanent mail-in ballot list. Might we not want to think about whether that category wants to be changed or eliminated? And or is there some way to remind people that they're on it? Because I've heard from people who actually didn't remember that they were on a permanent list. Is there some way to send a text before we mail out the ballots? Are you sure you want to mail in? I mean, I'm just throwing ideas out, and I don't want to make this longer and longer, but as long as we're on this, those are my questions.
Yeah, Boris, please start with what we already do. And then I have a comment in response to what Diane said as well. Go ahead. Boris, you are muted.
There are two different paths that are followed to notify these voters on the permanent mail-in ballot list that they are on the permanent mail-in ballot list. The first one is legal requirement imposed on State Board of Elections, I believe, to notify these voters via mail some 90 days before the mailing occurs.
Okay.
And the second thing is something that Montgomery County does. I'm not sure that other counties are doing it. I believe Anna Randall asked me about the text and how to do it themselves. We actually send emails to all voters who share their email addresses with us. And those email, the text of the email is adjusted to the different category of voters that we are sending, that are we reaching out to. We are fortunate enough that we benefit from a very robust TEBS department within the county, and their capacity to, they easily send like 500,000 emails in one afternoon once we have it ready. But we do reach out to voters on the permanent list, telling them, you are on the permanent list. This is how you requested, by mail or web delivery. Do you want to stay on it? This is how you can get out. You know, this is what you will need to do. We do the same thing for inactive voters, for active voters, for voters who you have fall into different categories. I think we were sending like 5 or 6 different texts because we divided all the voters in different categories. So we did it. We will continue to do it. With the election year or non-election year, we will do it in 25 again. It's a beneficial for us to, maybe in lack of better word, to catch voters when they move to update their residential address, to have our voter list as clean as possible. So we don't have bounce mail. We don't have voters going to the wrong precinct generating provisionals. We like to do these things ahead of time. Yet, on the end, then it's voters' choice. You know, they decide it's a nice day, I would like to vote in person. We are here to accommodate. Sometimes it's on a planning end, it's a very demanding. On a staffing end, it's demanding because we have to plan and staff for voters to choose whichever option of voting. So on election day, we can get another 30,000 mail-in ballots, or 30,000 people can show up at the polling place. So we have to be ready for both, meaning staffing in the office to receive mail-in ballots and staffing at the polling place to accommodate in-person voting. So this is one of those crystal ball moments that we don't have, but we try to do our best to project or forecast what could be the outcome.
Thank you, Boris. Let me just clarify that the communications that you just described are things that you determined would be useful. They're not things that are required by law or the state.
No.
That these are Montgomery County initiatives that we have done in order to be ahead of the game, and in order to be prepared for that. Is that correct, Boris? You are unmuted. You just, if you could
Sorry
answer.
for that.
Yeah.
So letters that state sends to permanent people on the permanent list is legal mandate. Everything beyond that is literally Montgomery County initiative. This is what we do by ourselves, for our voters, for our list maintenance, for our planning, anything that we can benefit. But yes, we came up with the front runners on this one.
Thank you. All right. So let me just say that I would oppose any effort to do away with the permanent mail-in ballot list. We had 166,000 voters who voted by mail. And we have more than 120,000 voters who are on that list. And to do away with it because a certain number of those voters also come to the polls, I think is the wrong solution. I personally would like to do a couple of things relating to that. Boris is doing many of them, but one of them is I'd like to remind voters who want to come to the polls on election day that if they bring their ballot with them, they can come to the polls, they can hand it to the election judge. They don't have to wait in line to do provisional ballots. They don't have to cause all that extra work for us. And they still can vote their mail-in ballot, but if they, and they can hand it to an individual rather than relying on either the drop boxes or the U.S. Postal Service for their mail-in ballots. But I would not. I think that if anything, our permanent mail-in ballot list has been a huge success, and wanted by many voters, and we definitely have voters who do not want to go to the polls ever again. And some of them may be elderly folks for whom going to the polls is or disabled folks for whom it's very complicated. Some of them may just be people who just want to vote in the privacy of their own home and take as much time as they need. There's lots of reasons why people choose whichever method of voting that they choose, but I'm glad that we are a leader in terms of encouraging people to pick their method of voting with correct knowledge, and that way they are happiest with it and causing less work for everybody else. So anyway, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which I believe is that the next item on the agenda is public comment. As of 2:30, we did not have anyone who was signed up for public comment. Boris, is there any news on that front? Is there anybody who has signed up in the meantime?
Lisa just confirmed that no one has signed since 2:30, so there are no
Okay.
public comments today.
Okay, is there anybody among our attendees who is seeking to comment today? If you are, you need to raise your hand, your Zoom hand, not your actual hand, because we cannot see your actual hand. And seeing no hands raised, we will move on. So the next item after public comments is the election director's report. Boris.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. The election director report has been shared with the board last Thursday, and it's published the same day on our website. It's available for everyone. The report itself is made of the same segments. Just very briefly, I have not been for decades with the board, but this is the first time I believe that I see that number of active voters in Montgomery County has crossed 700,000, which is a result, again, of high interest for the 2024 presidential election, our outreach efforts, our voter registration efforts, same-day registration, etc. In the report, in addition to this number, I also present a breakdown of party affiliation of total number of registered active voters in Montgomery County. When it comes to the state board, just a very brief note, the state board actually did certify the election results on December 5th. When it comes to personnel, we are moving into interviewing phase for vote by mail program manager 1 position, while we will need to re-advertise deputy director position in this period. The board will understand that we did carry a couple of vacancies for the last few months. The reason is very simple. It's election cycle. It's a burden of daily tasks did conflict with the increased hiring. We are working with our colleagues at OMB and OHR to prepare the manager of recruitment position for advertising. While meanwhile, our HR liaison administrative specialist is covering the position that was held previously by our former budget and finance specialist. Number of temporary employees, many times said, we are like an accordion. We expand in a run-up to the election. We start to shrink after the election. The board has noticed that there are plenty of tasks that are deadline driven still after the election season. We are talking about processing 60 to 80,000, I would say almost 80,000 voter registration records that we need to update in our database. Post-election maintenance on all the equipment has to be performed within certain deadline. The volume of shredding that and supply verification and organizing that operations will need to do, plus all the efforts that recruitment is already working on to reach out to prospective election judges for the 2026. When it comes to budget, I shared the document with the board. The document indicates last month's spending up to the overall spending. The board will notice there are two big items that need, I believe the most expenditures will take place in the third quarter or will be projected for the next board meeting, hopefully. One is state billing for the second quarter, and the second one is over $2.5 million spending for the stipends for the election judges, because the checks have been mailed out and that budget line will be depleted, in lack of a better word, as the payments go out to all those volunteers who helped us to have a successful 2024 presidential general election. When it comes to outreach, I included outreach in my report today because Gilberto is not with us, so we cannot have it as a separate item on the agenda. For all those ones interested, that last weekend was the first outreach event for the 2026 election. So
Oh my God.
Exactly. I think that's when we try to tell people that we literally don't stop. So last weekend, county council and county executive had a community fair organized, and we were present. We are already recruiting, as I said, for 2026 and reminding people that Voter registration is available throughout the whole year. Whether you are a new registrant or you moved and you need to update your address, name, or party, we are here. So we will continue through 2025, basically where we just started last weekend. When it comes to voter services, the board is aware that voter registration hits the closing advance deadline. It's 3 weeks before the election day. Voter registration reopens once certification is carried out through the state. Anyone who visits MVA in meanwhile and updates their voter registration, those records are in the queue, just like anything that's submitted online. Well, the line is open. We got 21,000 records to process there. We got around 8,000 ERIC records to process. I would say around 25,000 returned sample ballots that we need to process properly to either notify the voters or update their records. So it's a big amount in addition to everything that is incoming daily. So there is no stop for voter registration because every day someone is going to MVA. Every day someone is turning 16, someone is moving to the county, someone is becoming naturalized citizen. So this is ongoing process. We will rely on our team and a small number of temporary staff to remain with us until we do this post-election cleanup. Again, because it's time sensitive, we want to update records as early as possible because any additional move will just create the problems down the road because of the conflicting dates on the move records. When it comes to the IT, as I said, post-election maintenance of the equipment, that is the big ticket. It's a deadline driven, so we will rely on our team to carry it out. Plus, again, Janet will continue to work with the tabs to finalize the election resource management system to introduce all the changes necessary to have even better experience with the recruiting judges and having their applications processed. When it comes to operations section, over 600,000 unvoted ballots have to be shredded. So if that's a volume, and that's a volume for one card ballot. If board will recall, we had elections with 2 cards or 3 cards. So multiply with the number. If this will be one of those, I think 2022 we had 3-card ballot. We will have almost 2 million pages to shred. Shredding is not as straightforward because all the ballots come packed in sets with the plastic wraps. Plastic wrap has to be removed one by one before shredding takes place. So this will take some time for the team to carry out. And the last,
Boris, are those unvoted ballots or are those voted
unvoted
ballots?
ballots.
Unvoted ballots. Okay.
Unvoted ballots, blank. We retain voted ballots for 22 months. This is federal requirement. Unless maybe Kevin can share more, there's another court case that will extend that and I believe drive Mindy to the wall because we are running out of space to save those. The last section is recruitment. As I said, the team has processed all the stipend checks. They are in the mail to our election judges. We have notified them that they were coming. Pick-a-pal promotion is, of course, is going on every election cycle where we encourage election judges to bring a pal to serve with them, someone who hasn't served before. And of course, at the polling places on election day and early voting, we try to gauge interest of our voters if they would be interested to serve going forward. By the time I produce this report, we already contacted 1,700 voters who told us in some manner during their in-person voting experience that they might consider serving in 2026. So we are reaching out to them, while it's fresh, to get them in the system so we can have a better communication with them as we get to 2026 election, hoping that they will sign up for the training and actually serve as election judges. That will be a very brief summary of my report. Again, report is available on the website for everyone who is interested.
Thank you, Boris. Are there any questions for Boris about his report? Alex. Alex, if you're talking, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Boris, I had a couple questions about the expenditure tracking. I noticed we're about just under $30,000 over budget for overtime. Do we anticipate having to incur any further overtime before June 30th of next year?
So, no, there will be just minor upward adjustments to that overtime cost as we go forward. But as a general rule, we should be out of overtime for the rest of the fiscal year. Again, this is me just telling you at this moment, but every deadline-driven activity that's legally required or its state requires it for their own, we will do what's necessary to meet the deadlines. I hope we will not be in need to occur any more overtime because I think that staff worked a lot this election cycle, and the overtime number expenditures show that. So again, going forward, our goal is to meet all the deadlines without overtime, but deadlines are to be met. I cannot shy away from using overtime if need be. But again, I don't plan to.
Okay, good. Second question, software licensure maintenance agreements, that's line 60446. I noticed we had $0 budgeted for that, but we are currently year to date at 126,000. What is that for? Do you recall?
So, Lisa is sitting on the right side to me. So we have a couple of line items that actually, let me put it this way. We had a very productive meeting with our new budget analyst at OMB. The goal is to align the budget lines for the next budget and to eliminate those that are overlapping and by doing so, bring a clarity to the expenditure presentation as it is. What you are looking here, Alex, is the licensing cost for the new election management system that is being put in place. The system, again, don't make me talk about IT stuff, but the system is built on certain platform. Licensing needs to be paid annually based on the number of users and the capacity that will be used. Janet is a better person to explain the details, but we do pay licenses for the software that we use for these systems. So
Would you say election management, Boris, is that for election judges or is it use?
That's for the election judges.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but just for small remark for the board, Adobe software, Smartsheet, any software that is used by our GIS colleague that help us produce the maps, help us sustain the addresses aligned in our voter registration against the county GIS system. All those licenses are paid annually. So you will see here from, as I said, from big ticket items, which is for election judges system, to smaller ticket items, which is even Zoom license, right? Zoom, Smartsheet, Adobe, anything for the GIS system, everything will go there. Again, unfortunately, I believe that we have to do our part and streamline this into better categorized version, so the presentation would be much cleaner on our end.
So will that involve, because I was just wondering why we didn't budget any money for that, but it may be that it was embedded in some other line item, you know.
It was budgeted as overall cost for the system, but again, by the time when we budgeted, Alex, we knew there will be a cost, but TEBS was deciding on the partner and platform on which it would build it, and we were just recipient of their selection because they have to decide what's the best technological solution, right? So we knew the cost was coming and the money was there, just not in the line like this.
Okay. My final question is on the second page, near the top, outside printing for the sample ballot and central duplicating bulk postage. I noticed that we went substantially over budget on those. I guess, would that be explained by the need to send out the sample ballot again because of the language error? Is that correct?
So there are two items here. If you go through this document, and believe me, we already had this conversation here. There are multiple postages, multiple mailings that we produce as the board. And what you see here is a historical carryover of, I would say, Lisa, 6, 7 different lines that, to put it simply, Alex, they have to be brought down to 2 or 3. They have to be simplified and expenditures, because we pay a printing of the sample ballot, we pay postage for it, we pay postage for the voter notification cards, we pay postage for the voter update cards, those green ones that go out. Sample ballot, we get it right because that goes against the number of registered voters. Number of voter notification cards in a year, a number of voter update cards, that's your guess is good as mine. How many people will move and something like that. When it comes to the overall cost of the sample ballot, yes, there was a financial cost that occurred with the error, but that cost should not in any way affect our bottom line when it comes to the overall budget of the board of elections.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is these numbers look very high to me. So should we be thinking about, budgeting more for this in the next fiscal year? I don't know, but that's why I was asking. But
there are two lines of thinking here. Number one, it's reorganizing them so they will more clearly describe what is needed, and the second thing is the overall cost. Right now, we get into conversation whether a certain number of certain expenditures carry equally in a presidential general versus gubernatorial primary. Again, we can go by historical. We can look at the latest data. We can assume if the 755,000 is the new number of registered voters, that quite big chunk of our voting population did update of their registration. Would it translate, Alex, in a 2026 primary the same again? Yeah, it's fair conversation to have, but again, some guessing needs to take place.
okay, yeah, those are all the questions I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Are there any other questions for Boris about his report? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which is the Board Attorney's report. Kevin.
Thank you, David. So as Boris indicated, under federal law, typically the board maintains election-related materials for 22 months following an election. There have been lawsuits filed challenging the 2020 and 2022 election results. Both cases were filed in the United States District Court for the District of Maryland. Both were dismissed on the basis of lack of standing by Judge Gallagher. One of the cases involving, ironically, the 2022 election challenge, I think was argued last week by the Assistant Attorney General for the State Board of Elections. The other case involving the 2020 election results, the Gibson case, I received a notice over the weekend that case has been referred to a 3-judge panel that's reviewing the briefs to determine whether they believe oral argument will be of any benefit to the panel. So it will either go one of two paths, which is they'll either schedule oral argument, which won't be held for a couple of months, or they'll probably issue an unreported per curiam opinion. And that could come out in the next 60 days. But unfortunately, Mindy, I apologize, but there does not seem to be any end in sight. And so we are holding, and it really is a problem, not just a Montgomery County problem, it's a problem for the entire state, because we, as well as other local boards of elections, are holding a tremendous amount of election-related material for 2020 and 2022, and obviously 2024 is in the books. So Mindy, I'm sure, is thinking of some very creative ways to store things until we can get some resolution on some of these cases. But we really have no other choice. We have a litigation hold from the Attorney General's office for both 2020 and 2022.
Kevin, the three judge panel is at the Federal Circuit Court. Is that
It's at the United States Court of Appeals for the
for
Fourth
the Fourth
Circuit.
Circuit? Okay.
And the Fourth Circuit does not announce who the three-judge panel is. And if they hold oral argument, they generally don't announce who the panel is until the morning of oral argument.
So there's three judges on the Fourth Circuit. We don't know who they are, who are going to decide whether to hold oral argument. If they hold oral argument, I assume that it'll get scheduled and we'll know when it's going to be. If
Correct.
they don't hold oral argument, you're saying that they might just decide based on the papers and issue an opinion.
Correct. So it takes one member of the three-judge panel to vote to go ahead and hold oral argument. If no one votes to hold oral argument, they'll just issue an opinion, which would be helpful. And hopefully that's what they'll do, given the fact that they have a substantially similar case that they did hold oral argument in. And it was listed, both cases were listed as related in nature. So perhaps with any luck, the same panel has both cases.
Okay. Thank you.
That's all I have to report.
Okay. Any questions for Kevin? Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Seeing none, we move to old business. Is there any old business to come before the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the website report. Boris.
Thank you. Before I start about the website, Lisa is sharing a link with the board members and Kevin for the executive session that will follow this regular session as we speak. So you should have it in your inbox momentarily.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you to Lisa.
When it comes to the website statistics, I think that we have a huge number of page views in October. We are talking almost about 800,000 visits to our website. Most importantly, 500,000 of those visits were related to the wait times at early voting sites.
Wow.
So if you look at the upper right, from the right to the left, I keep 3 months record, last 3 months, September, October, November. We went from 100 to 800 back to 200 visits at our website. If you look at the very bottom, you will see, the top 10 visited sites. This should be restarted on October at 1. Early voting was 500,000 visits. Wow. So this tells us a lot about the fact that people wanted to vote, people tried to avoid the lines, yet the lines were created and our site was useful. Whether some voters decided to move from one location to another based on the wait times, we can talk about that. Whether some voters decided actually to go back home and maybe mail their mail-in ballot, return it, it's also an option, or to show up on election day. All I'm just trying to emphasize is that there is a benefit in what we do, how we do it, and 800,000 visits in 1 month is a lot. 500,000 visits to wait times. I don't know. I don't have the statistics for the previous election as the board we just started it lately, but I believe that's number that didn't happen before. So that's just 2 items that I wanted to emphasize. If you look at the number of distinct users, we went from 35,000 in September to 145,000 in October, and then back then to 70,000 in November. So I believe that the spike across all the segments of our website indicates that our voters were using our website for the purposes. They don't stay long on our website, which for me, I'll be very honest, it's a good indicator. They come in, they find what they need, and they get out. They come for the wait times, they come for their polling place location, they come to know how to request mail-in ballot. So, work in progress, but so far, I think it was beneficial for our voters.
Thank you, Boris. Are there questions for Boris?
Boris, just a quick question. I mean, the numbers are just amazing. How are folks reaching us through the text options that we have as well? Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's a separate data set that we will have to pull, and I believe that we can pull it, and that we had it in the last presentation for 2022 election. So we might have it again for the 2024 in the January report. So it's our texting option utilization, number of downloads of the Moco Votes app, number of users, and stuff like that. Again, there's a caveat in our website. Has a whole set of links that are the state board. The same goes with the texting options. We are intermediary. We want voters to come to our website to know that this is that we are trusted source of information or the links. At the moment they go further, they end up at the state board of election website. But again, they go through us. We are intermediary because that's what we should be for our voters.
I totally agree. The only thing is I just wanted to see which devices or which channel they're using. So if someone is using a handheld device versus a laptop or desktop, because that could tell a lot between how do we make sure that our site, and which it is right now in terms of web friendly for both desktop laptops and handheld devices. Well, thank you so much.
Fair enough. I would say that as you see from September, October, November, number of mobile users went up. I would say 2/3 of our voters are addicted to their phones. They do their business on the phone. And this is how they communicate with us and with everything. So we prefer it like that. If you are on the street and see one of the banners which says text check to 77788, we prefer voters pull out their phone and do it immediately instead of trying to remember to do it when they get home on their desktop. Again, I think it's beneficial for the voter. It's beneficial for us. I have my phone in my hands 15 hours a day. I think that every team member is like that. I don't know for the board members, I assume it's the same story. So this is the new lifestyle. We do everything on our phones. So we try to accommodate as well.
But apparently we do everything on our phones more in October and November than in September, which I think is probably a sign that people are being referred on the texting system as part of that. At the very least.
And especially, David, if you are at the early voting center and you see the line, you pull out your phone to check the wait times. You don't go home to check on the desktop, right?
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I will just point out that your statistics say that people checked. We had 500,000 page views of early voting wait times, and we had about 160,000 early voters. So that would suggest that, first of all, people check multiple times, or they check and decide to vote by a different means, or I mean, there's a number of different things, but clearly, a lot more people, there are a lot more checks of the waiting times than there are people voting. 3 times as many.
If I may add to this, there's a very simple explanation. If I'm in downtown Silver Spring at 5 o'clock, I would rather do some grocery shopping while checking the wait times to see if they will improve over that period of time. So people were not necessarily standing in line. They were going on with their life, with their business, checking periodically to see if the wait times have changed, or if they're on the way home passing by Potomac, checking what's the better option, to stay in Silver Spring or go to Potomac. So our voters utilize the opportunity that we provide them to figure out the best way.
My only suggestion on that, Boris, is that when we train our election judges about providing this information, we should probably give them some of this data so they know how well used it is. Because I know that it's some may view it as a distraction from dealing with voters, especially if they have voters in line, while this is going on, but it's obviously very important to our voters to have this information. and glad that we're doing it. Any other comments on the website reports or questions about the website report? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to new business. The one item of new business that is on our agenda is the election administration improvement proposals, which I am going to be moving. And let me just explain that it is a combination of things that we have considered before, things that came up during Canvas that one or the other of us brought up. They're not all mine. Some of them came from you guys. But the idea is that, and let me also talk about the timing. We're late as far as legislation is concerned because many of our legislators have already have drafted their legislation, et cetera. I hope we're not too late to have things happen, but we have what I would call a kind of systemic conflict, which is that the legislature, for reasons that I approve of, generally considers election legislation in odd-numbered years rather than in even-numbered years, so that they don't make last-minute changes to elections, except in very rare circumstances. But we are always fully employed in the fall before that odd-numbered year legislative session, as we were this year. So it is very hard for us to come up with our proposals while we're meeting multiple days per week in November, counting votes. So anyway, this was an attempt to get this before the board. It is, I would also add that it is available on our website. And so what I propose to do and what I'm about to do is I am going to move the approval of the whole list. And then if anybody wants to discuss any particular proposals, I can go through them, bit by bit. I probably should do that quickly for those who I do want to be mindful of the time, but I also want to make sure that people are aware of what the proposals are. And then if someone has a proposal that they want, that they either object to, want to talk about, or whatever, they can move to take it off the list, or they can ask that it be voted on separately. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not trying to make everyone vote for things that they don't want to vote for, but I personally think that the entire list would make a huge beneficial benefit to election administration in Montgomery County. So that being said, I move that the board endorse the list of the proposed list of election improvements.
No, second it.
Okay. Actually, Ami had her hand up. All right. Ami, you are muted, but I will say that Ami seconded it just for the benefit of bipartisanship. But thank you, Daniel and Ami. Let me just get the board's thoughts on this. I was thinking that I would just do a quick run through of what the proposals are and then come back and ask people if they have any particular ones they want to talk about.
Sure.
I'm concerned that if we talk about each individual one, that we'll be here all night, and I'm guessing that some are more controversial than others. So anyway, okay. So let's. So I will now go to the list, and since I'm reading from the list, I may or may not hear you if you are trying to interrupt me on the list. So if that is the case, feel free to unmute yourself and to ask to interject if I don't happen to notice you, because I'm trying to both read and watch you guys at the same time.
But wait,
okay.
do you want
Yes.
to say, I want to make sure I got that clear. Are you going to go all the way through them and then we
I'm
talk?
going to go all the way through them and then we talk. But
Got
if you cannot wait until I go all the way through them, and you want to get my attention, What I'm saying is that while I'm reading all the way through them, that will be on my screen, and Zoom will only show me one person while that is happening. So I will not necessarily see everyone whose hand is raised.
Okay, I'm gonna
So
try to control myself. Thank you. Kidding.
okay, I would appreciate that level of self-control so that we
Thanks.
can. I want the folks who are not on the board to make sure they understand the rationale behind the proposals, and then we can discuss them. Happy to have everyone's ideas. Alex, you had your hand up.
Well, in view of what your last statement about the members of the public, I was thinking since we already have the document, perhaps dispensing with reading it aloud would be more efficient with time, and we could just go through and decide who has a comment about what. But
Well, let me say that because the board members have already had it, the public has only had it for a short time. I will make my reading will be quick. Okay, I will because I'm not trying to be, you know, like the clerk in the House of Representatives who has to read things, you know, from start to finish. I'm really just trying to, you know, make sure that people understand, you know, what the proposals are. So that being said, let me go to it. So the list is divided into essentially three categories. The first two categories are legislation and administrative. Legislation being things that would require changes to law. Administrative being things that either we could do or the state could do. I've actually noted in the list the things that I have put in red, the things that would require state action or that might be preferable to have state action versus the things that we could do ourselves. So I'll just very quickly, the first one is referring to the provision of law that deals with when a mail-in ballot is timely. The way that the law is phrased, and the law goes back to a time when we both had many fewer mail-in ballots, when we didn't have postage paid envelopes that were being used in response, and basically a very different time. But what the law says is that we have to consider the postmark in determining whether the ballot was marked timely. As board members know, we have discovered at least since 2022, or if not earlier, that there were some occasions where postmarks are added to ballots not when they are mailed by the voter, but when they are received at various post offices in Montgomery County, having been mailed somewhere else. This would be to provide us authority to, when the circumstances so dictate, indicate that we believe that the ballot was mailed in a timely fashion, notwithstanding that. Number two, in 2019, state law was changed so that every jurisdiction in Maryland, except for Montgomery and Prince George's County, no longer had substitute board members. They made their substitute board members into regular board members. I am proposing that Montgomery County do that now. In 2019, I do not recall being asked my opinion on that. I would have been happy to make our substitute board members regular board members. But whatever the case, I am proposing that we do that now. I don't really see a reason. I mean, our substitute board members work just as hard, come to canvas. I just don't see any particular reason for them to be treated differently. Number three, which is a proposal to move the June 2026 primary election 1 week earlier. It is currently, according to state law, the last Tuesday in June. I'm proposing to have it 1 week earlier. The last Tuesday in June of 2026 is June 30th. I'm proposing June 23rd. There's a lot of uncertainty because that is so far in the future, but MCPS recently issued its calendar for 2025-26. The last day for students is June 17th. The later that our election is, the more likely that we could have conflict with school construction schedules, which means that we lose polling places on election day and then have to find other ones. There's also the possibility of conflicts with rec department summer camps, although those schedules are all in a bit of a state of flux. So I cannot say to you precisely when those camps are going to be. But I will say that we know from experience that the later in the summer that we have that primary election, the harder it is for us, or usually it is for us to get election judges because people go on vacation. So, and this is a very modest change. This is I want to repeat, a 1 week change from June 30th to June 23rd. Number 4, this is to clarify that the state provision requiring parity between the 2 major political parties for election judges is a matter of best efforts, given the makeup of each county's registered voters, and that we do not need to wait to appoint unaffiliated and young judges. This was raised as an issue in Talbot County in 2024. Talbot County has much closer to even party registration between Democrats and Republicans. We worked very hard to recruit Republican election judges, and we increased our efforts in 2024. And I think we did a very good job of doing outreach, but parity is nearly impossible. We've never had it. I don't think Kevin has ever witnessed it in his time as our counsel, although he can obviously speak for himself in that category. And with 14% of Montgomery County registered voters being Republicans, while 59% are Democrats and about 25% are unaffiliated, we are always going to be in a situation, I believe, that we are going to need not only Republicans, also independents, and also Democrats to be our election judges. A parity requirement is not realistic in Montgomery County's case. It is a very worthy goal. We try to get as many as we can. If there are ideas for how to recruit more Republican judges, I would love to hear them. If our Republican members have ideas for how they can recruit more Republican judges, please do it. But the numbers are the numbers. Number 5, currently, if a voter who is listed on our voter registry as an unaffiliated voter or a Republican voter attends to vote in the Democratic primary, or vice versa, they are an unaffiliated voter or a Democratic voter and attempt to vote in the Republican primary, we are required to throw out their entire ballot. And that strikes me as being unfair and inappropriate, because we have the Board of Education races that by law are nonpartisan races, and every voter is eligible to vote in those races. What I propose to do is to treat that like we do provisional ballots when somebody is eligible to vote in some races but not others, such as when they vote out of precinct or in another congressional or legislative district, where their votes for the races that they're eligible to vote for are counted, their votes for the races that they're not eligible to vote for are not. So that's proposal number 5. Proposal number 6, that would be to eliminate the provision that requires us to reject ballots with identifying marks and signatures. There are currently significant inconsistencies in the law, and the inconsistency is that we are presented with identifying marks on ballots that are voted by mail because they come to us in the mail canvas, and we are presented with those ballots for voters who vote provisionally because it comes to us in the provisional canvas. But if we are dealing with ballots that are put in the scanners at early voting or on election day, those ballots, if the scanner accepts them, are accepted. They are not kicked out because they have identifying marks on them. The scanner is not going to be able to read identifying marks unless they are in certain locations on the ballot. There is no principled reason why we should have different rules for um, for early voting and election day than we do for mail-in ballots. I think it is extraordinarily difficult in the system that we have for anyone to use the identifying mark for an illicit purpose. As board members know, in our case, almost always the person who signs their ballot is doing so because they made a mistake of some sort, and they are telling us, some version of, yes, I really did make this correction, or I'm sorry, or whatever. I think it would be better to eliminate that provision. Number 7 would allow for the curing of provisional ballots similar to mail-in ballots for voters to sign the application or correct or add information. We had, I believe, hundreds of provisional ballots where literally the page of information is not filled in. Whether that was the fault of the voter or the election judge, we do not know. But in many cases, that information could be provided if voters were given the opportunity to cure, similar to what they are for mail-in ballots. Number 8, this is strictly a technical change. It would update the current provision describing the oath required for mail-in ballots to include that it could also be a separately printed oath that is not on the envelope. The provision makes reference to the oath being on the envelope. If you do a web-delivered printed home ballot, since it's your own envelope, the oath is not on the envelope. The oath is a separate page. We also want our voters who are in that circumstance to remember to include that oath. Number 9, we have had conversations on many occasions about the issue of vote centers and whether that would be a benefit to our voters. And it's particularly an issue for those voters who treat the election day polling places that are held where early voting had been held like their vote centers, even though they're not. And so they end up voting provisionally in those cases. I don't think that we are at the point where the legislature would be ready for vote centers, and I don't even know whether I am ready for vote centers, but I do think that it is worthy of study. I think we should be looking at what effect it would have on voter turnout, on the number of election judges needed, on security issues, because vote centers require connectivity so that people cannot go from one vote center to another and vote multiple times. So the idea would be to have a study of this and get a report back in about a year so that we can look at it for the future. And this would eliminate, at least vote centers would eliminate one particular category of provisional ballots, which are voters who vote out of precinct on election day. And then number 10 is actually something that we are already doing, which is to explain the practical effect on us of the local legislation dealing with ranked choice voting and approval voting. And I want to thank all of my colleagues for your comments. We are scheduled to testify this evening. Ami and I will be testifying, and Boris will be joining us in order to answer any questions. I know that there are board members who are very sympathetic to ranked choice voting or approval voting. I know there are board members who are very much in opposition to ranked choice voting and approval voting. Our goal today is neither. We're not going to be supporting or opposing the legislation. We're just going to provide practical impact so that the people who are voting on it get a sense as to how we think such a change could affect us and Montgomery County voters. Do you all want me to continue with the administrative changes? Now, I will say that those are not as urgent as the legislative ones, given the schedule for the legislature. I think they are useful for people to know about, but and in some cases, there are ways to deal with some of these issues that if they don't pass legislation, we still have things that we want to do. because obviously we can't do it all. But actually, I'll tell you what, let's leave those. Unless you all object, I'm gonna suggest that we talk about the legislative list first. Because I think that if we run out of time, that's the thing that we absolutely need to do. Alex, before I call on you, are you seeking to talk about the process, or are you seeking to talk about the list?
Well, it was a process-related question, perhaps,
Okay.
given the hour of the day, would it make sense to postpone the administrative changes to discussion in January? I don't know.
Well, let's see where we are when we finish discussing the legislative proposal. How about that? I do agree with you. I don't want to keep us here all night. And I can't because we have another engagement. But I don't have a problem with that. I might want to get a sense of the board as to which of the things on that list would be considered controversial before we postpone it, because it's way easier for me to to get approval for whatever I can get approval for. Anyway, let's talk about the legislative list. I would be happy to recognize whoever wants to comment on whatever they want to comment on. If you want to take something off the list, I am going to ask people to make a motion to take something off the list, and then we can discuss that one individually. Alex, have I already answered your question before I call on Diane? Or did you have something you wanted to say about the list when you raised your hand just now?
Oh, well, there are some things I'd like to say about the list, but I was just suggesting that maybe it would make sense to defer consideration of the administrative changes, just knowing
I'm not going to
generate some discussion.
I'm not going to address that until we finish with the legislative list. Diane.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. President. What is the administrative list?
It's on the same piece of
Again?
paper. It's on the same document.
I've only got 10 items here.
Well, then you have to look at the next page.
Oh my God. I have not, okay, well then I guess I won't weigh in on administrative right now. My comments are legislative. So Alex, if you wanted to go ahead, or
No, we're not talking about the administrative list now. We're talking about the legislative list now.
right, but I didn't know if he was going on legislative. Okay, let me just start and throw these out there. I do want to support you on number 3. I would even like to see it moved another week earlier, but happy to go along with some kind of a
If we move it another week earlier, Diane, it's before the last day of school.
I know, I'm just so concerned about how many people leave town as soon as school is over.
We would literally be telling the Board of Education after they establish their calendar for the school year that we would be moving the election day to what they view as their second to last day of school, and they have legal requirements for the number of days that they have school per year. They would literally have to change their calendar to make their calendar go later.
Okay, is there any consideration of the fact that we just held a primary in May and we didn't seem to have a problem with locations and we were able to get judges? I mean, we've already done it before school is out.
Well, yes, but we did it with a significant amount of advance notice. Look, if you want to propose to change the date, Diane, make a motion. I'm telling you why I propose moving it by 1 week. I propose moving it by 1 week because I wanted to have it as soon after school is out as possible. I was hoping to have early voting while school is still on, because I think the chances of the rec department having camp starting while school is still on is pretty slim. So I thought that the availability of rec department buildings is most likely to be available while school is still on. But
okay, I'll pass on that. I'm with you.
You know, okay.
Let
Let me make a suggestion just for expediting this conversation. Again, a lot of these are things we've discussed before. A lot of these are things that came up during the course of our prior discussions. How about we just start off with if people have proposals that they want to take things off the list.
Okay.
And
I
again,
would
I'm only talking about the legislative list at this point.
Yeah, which is all I'm aware of, unfortunately. I would, number one, if I were to only go with one item, I would like to remove from the list, number 6, which will come as a surprise to no one.
I'm sorry, Diane, are you making a motion? Because you can propose to remove multiple things if you want. You can propose to remove one thing if you want. I just want to make sure I understand what you're proposing.
Well, right, I'm proposing one at a time. I would like to remove
Number 6.
number 6.
Okay, is there a second to Diane's motion?
Second.
Okay, Diane, speak your motion.
All right. I believe that this would be no, excuse me. I believe this is contrary to our historical system of voting since the late 1800s, when we adopted the Australian ballot, which was the anonymous vote, and for the anonymity of the vote. And I believe it's important to preserve the practice we have of not allowing ballots with identifying marks on it, to preserve that anonymity, in recognition of the possibility of coercion, intimidation, bribery. You know, if people want to sell their vote, well,
Diane, how do you answer the question about why we allow it for in-person voting?
I don't think they're similar at all.
You don't think that people can be
voting
intimidated in in-person voting?
with signing a ballot, the distinction I see is if you sign your and you're saying it's premised on the fact that if you sign your ballot and you're voting in person, your vote is going to get counted because it'll go through the machine, so it's not rejected. Correct?
Correct.
And I'm saying
we do not review those unless there's a recount.
Right. Well, you usually don't have somebody in the booth with you when you're marking your ballot, looking to see how you voted and if you've signed it. Once the ballot and the chain of custody is you alone have got control of that ballot, you alone are looking at it, you alone in anonymity take it to where it is then fed into a machine. And if your name is on it thereafter, nobody can prove that it was you. Because once a vote is put on a machine, they become widgets, they're interchangeable. However, if you have a mail-in ballot and there could be a protracted period of time during which it's in your possession or not, other people are able to see it, other people are able to make sure that you have voted the way they wanted, your name is on it. And furthermore, chain of custody, you aren't necessarily the only person in anonymity who fills out the ballot, signs your name, and then maybe takes it to whatever mode of transportation in the channel of transportation to get it to where it is ultimately calibrated as a vote. So I see the two as dissimilar.
Okay, is there any other discussion on Diane's motion? Alex.
Mr. President, although I can't vote on the motion, I do enthusiastically support it. I don't see that we have a really compelling reason to change what's been a historically sound rule for a long time. I don't view that we have different rules for different modes of voting. It's one uniform rule that applies everywhere. It's always been illegal to sign a ballot, no matter what method by which it is cast. The fact that it may have result in greater rejection with mail-in canvas than it does in person, I don't think is a distinction that really, merits a good consideration. And the number of rejected ballots for identifying marks has got to be, just from my own recollection, it's got to be way under 50. It's not a huge problem that I see out there, and it may create unintended consequences that we can't foresee right now. So I would say this is fairly controversial, and I don't see a reason to change it now. There are many other good ideas on this list, but those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Let me just say, well, I don't know if others wanted to speak to this. I'm going to say in my response that I think we do have a huge problem. I think that if we have a rule that, Alex, you say applies to everyone, but is really only enforced for mail-in ballots, then we are disadvantaging the 1/3 of our voters who have opted to vote by mail-in ballot, which is, in fact, not only a legal means of voting, but the preferred means of voting of 1/3 of our voters. I very much don't want our voters to sign their ballots. And you'll see in the administrative list that apparently Diane has not had a chance to read yet, that I am suggesting that we put on the ballot, don't sign this ballot. So I don't want people to sign their ballots, but I think it is horribly unfair that when someone makes a mistake and then crosses it out and signs their name, that because we are worried that someone else could use it for some kind of graft purpose that probably hasn't been prosecuted in my lifetime. Or if it has, it would be when I was, in preschool. That the idea that that's not a big deal, especially at a time that we all know that, at least currently, mail-in ballot voters are politically different than in-person voters. So the idea that we are going to enforce it against mail-in ballot voters and not against in-person voters is also an unfairness. And then I would just say that I think that I agree with you that it's not a huge number of people, but that to me is an argument that that this provision has outlived its usefulness, and because it's an even smaller number of people who have used this in a fashion that is that has anything to do with election integrity. Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think there should be an agreement that in Montgomery County, we've been having very close contested races. And so therefore, any universe of votes could impact the election result. So even though it's not a huge universe, but the universe of voters we're talking about could actually change election outcomes here in Montgomery County, given our past, or I'll say recently past elections. The fact that during canvass, I observe, and I believe many of my colleagues, where I would say almost, I don't want to say all, but majority of the identifying marks that were observed by our canvassers were referred to us as board members to make a decision on what we consider to be an identifying mark. And then when those board referrals came to us, there was a variation between, is this someone putting their initials, or does this match the envelope? I believe the more clarity we have in subject matters like this, the better it is. So again, just because something has always been one way does not necessarily mean it has to stay that way. So I'll incline to definitely vote with the board president on this matter, because I believe that consistency will make it whereby you don't have variation, not only between in-person voting early voting versus mail-in ballots, but it makes it consistent when it comes to even our decision, right? Where we've said, for example, as a rule, that an initial we've considered not to be an identifying mark versus a signature or writing of a name. Thank you.
Okay, before I call on Diane for a second comment, is there anybody who hasn't spoken who would like to speak? Okay, Diane.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to add in response to your comment, which is certainly understood, that to your knowledge during your lifetime, you don't know of this issue being prosecuted. I'm not sure the right word. I don't want to mischaracterize, but my point is, historically, back when the Australian ballot was adopted in the late 1800s, late 1800s, it was because the landed gentry were able to exert influence on the laborers who voted, and that is one of the reasons that they went to the anonymous voting. Things, of course, have changed a lot. We use a different method now, but our communications is much more rapid and widespread. And I believe that it would just be foolish to upend hundreds of years of tradition that were well-founded because of issues of coercion, intimidation, bribery, for maybe 20 ballots that I can remember have had to be rejected. I think that the weight of the grievance with intimidation, coercion, fraud is much greater than a handful of votes that may not be voted because people are not following the law. I understand people make mistakes, but I think the historical nature and the public policy reasons for adopting this outweigh these other concerns. And just to add, also one of the reasons for the anonymity was because of the coercion unions were putting on the ballot. So historically, there are great examples of why this public policy was adopted. And that's it.
I'll just say that the number of votes that we're talking about far exceeds the number of instances of abuse that anyone can cite to. And as the board vice president very eloquently stated, in a county where the county executive primary was decided by 32 votes in 2022, and I believe 77 or 78 votes in 2018, a small number of ballots makes a difference. I know, Diane, that you do have a belief in sticking with historical norms. And I respect historical norms, but where voting is concerned and where our society is concerned, there are many things that are, history has only had happen, that history has called for that today's world does not. In today's world, everyone has a phone. And lots of people take pictures of their ballots. And the state has, in fact, passed a regulation allowing people to take pictures of their ballots. So, that didn't exist in 1800. It didn't exist in 1980. The world is a very different place. But you say you don't think the number of ballots warrants it. I don't think the number of abuses warrants it. I think the number of abuses, we would have to go back really, really far in order to find one. But we do know that people sign their ballots in every election. In every election, we see ballots where people sign their names. At least everyone that since I've been on the board. So I'm not aware of any of those instances we reject them. We're required to reject them. But I don't, we haven't heard of any of those abuses.
Mr.
Anyway.
President, would it be
would-
fair to ask whether your proposal now is motivated mainly by the fact that we have seen this most often in the mail-in canvass? And if we did not have such widespread mail-in voting, this would not be an issue for you?
No, that's not true. I would say that it's motivated by my having sat through the mail-in canvass, as all of us have, and cringed every time someone signs their ballot thinking that they are doing what they're supposed to, because they are used to the idea that if you make a change to something, that you're supposed to initial it or sign it, when in fact they don't know. And I would tell you that many people do not know that signing your ballot invalidates your ballot. I would say the vast majority of people, I would even venture to guess a huge number of elected officials don't know that if you sign your ballot, it does not get counted. So to me, that is my motivation. My motivation is that unlike what Diane said, I think that if there's 20 votes that we can count from people who were legitimate voters, then I consider that to be a very worthwhile endeavor on our part. Diane, I'm going to call on you, and then I'm going to take a vote. Go ahead.
There we go. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Just to counter, I do want to say that I think saying that we haven't seen examples of this is specifically for the reason that the practice is outlawed. So I don't think that argument
Not true at all.
bears much weight.
Not true at all. As you yourself said, we've had somewhere between 20 and 50 examples of it in the last election. So it's clearly the fact that it's
I'm
outlawed
saying when you're saying
the fact that it's outlawed has not prevented it.
No, I thought you were talking about we don't have examples of bribery, coercion, intimidation. And I'm saying the reason we don't have examples of that is because the exact practice that would allow that has been barred for the last couple hundred years. And I don't see any reason to change that.
Well,
Not expect
okay.
the same result. I don't
let's
mean to raise
clarify.
my voice. I'm getting raspy.
Okay.
And that's
Okay,
the
go
only
ahead.
reason.
Go ahead. So
done,
let's just clarify something here. Okay. If it were legal for people to sign their ballots, no member of this board would ever see that ballot. It would be a canvass team that would see that ballot. The ballot would then go to the scanner and be scanned. And if somebody wanted to coerce somebody because they wanted to know how they voted, they would have almost no chance of finding out how they voted. Because the only reason that we get the names of people who voted, who signed their name, is because it's prohibited. So I would argue that, again, this antiquated provision is not what is stopping people from, from being coerced in their vote. You can be coerced in your vote no matter what method you choose. And again, we are more likely to know the identity of a voter who signed their name when it's illegal than if it were legal.
Mr. President, could I just ask, have you made any efforts to determine what the original purpose behind this prohibition was? And are you convinced that the reason it was enacted when it was no longer applies, or that these kind of things that people were concerned about in the past don't occur now?
Alex, as you know, we've heard anecdotally about why it was passed in terms of the possibility of coercion. I'm not aware of that ever having been an issue in recent times. Society has changed. Mail-in balloting has changed. It's unfair to mail-in ballot voters that they have a different rule. I'm not so interested in what people in 1800 thought, given the number of voters that are being disenfranchised by this provision. I'm interested in what is the purpose of this rule today. I don't think this rule has a purpose today. That is why I have proposed it the way I did. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I'll just say, I don't think we've turned into angels in the last 200 years.
I would agree with that statement, Diane. We have not turned into angels in the last 200 years in many different respects. This provision unrelated to that statement, in my opinion. Okay, let's vote on Diane's amendment. All those in favor of Diane's amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed to Diane's amendment, please say nay. Nay. Kina is voting nay.
Nay.
Daniel is voting nay. Ami? Ami, you are muted.
I'm sorry, I'm abstaining, David.
Okay, so the motion is defeated. 1 in favor, 3 against, 1 abstention. Are there other motions on the legislative list? Alex?
Mr. President, I would like to remove item number 7 from the list. And I so move to eliminate number 7. I'm concerned that creating a cure process for provisional ballots for things like missing signature or failure to fill out the form is going to create, again, an unnecessary additional burden on our staff when they're already busy with so many other things. I'm not wild about the cure process for mail-in ballots either, but I understand that happens. And I guess that's currently the law. Again, at this point in the process, when the provisional ballots come in, to require a cure process is a burden that our staff doesn't need, and I think it's a bridge too far.
Okay, is there a second?
My hand was up. Well, second. Yeah, second, sorry.
Okay. Alex, did you have anything further you wanted to say about your motion?
No.
No. Okay. Diana, is your hand up because you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I just want to support Alex in that motion and add that I don't think we should be analogizing provisional ballots to mail-in ballots for purposes of this item. Provisional ballots are something that has been offered to allow everybody to vote. And I look at it as a separate and special category. And I think allowing a curing process for something that happens on election day this is not going to sound right, but I don't know how else to say it for brevity, is being too generous when already allowing a benefit. I'm sorry, I can't be more articulate than that, but I think that I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you,
Mr.
Diane.
President, I would just add, I'd be all in favor of adding, asking, the provisional judges to, check these things to make sure the voter signs it, whatever, while they're there.
We already do that, Alex. We
That's
already
fine.
ask our provisional judges to check these things.
Okay,
Ami,
there you are.
go ahead.
More thing to do.
I think there's a valid point in arguing about a cure process for provisional ballots that are cast on election day. I'm wondering if there is a way to allow it for those that are cast during early voting, when there is sufficient time. And it is much more like the mail-in ballot curing process at that point.
Let me remind everybody that provisional voters have until the start of the provisional canvass, which is a week and a day after election day, to provide information as to their eligibility to vote by provisional ballot. So we already have the equivalent of a cure possibility for someone. For example, if they have their proof of residence, they don't have it with them on election day or at early voting. And Kevin or Boris, feel free to tell the board if I am wrong, but they are able to come up until the start of the provisional ballot canvass on the Wednesday that is a week and a day after election day in order to provide that information. This would be an opportunity to do the same thing for when we literally, and we had I don't remember exactly how many, but we had a huge number. And Diane, you were not there when Ami and I went through these provisional ballots. We had a huge number where all we had was the voter's name and nothing else. And in that circumstance, there's nothing to check. So we would, and I totally disagree with the idea that it's not analogous. It is analogous. It's analogous by a different method of voting where where there's a legal requirement that the voter has not met, just like for mail-in ballots. And we already, under Maryland state law, allow voters in some circumstances to provide further information in order to have their provisional ballot counted. This would merely expand that provision in order to allow it for other things that are, there's a good possibility not the fault of the voter. Ami.
Okay, I will agree with that point. I had forgotten that we could cure some things today, and the issue is, can we cure more things? And so I will support your your list.
Okay, is there any further debate on this motion? Okay, I think for simplicity's sake, I'll just do a roll call. Daniel.
Are we voting on Alex's motion?
We're voting on Alex's motion. If you're for his motion to strike to strike number 7, you vote aye. If you are against his motion to strike number 7, you vote no.
No.
Okay, Ami.
No.
Diane.
Aye.
Keena.
No.
And I vote no. It fails by a 4-to-1 vote. Are there any other motions?
Mr. President, I had more.
Alex.
I had more of a question about number 10.
Okay.
Have you sort of fleshed out exactly what this explanation is? Is this a reference to your testimony? Is that it?
Yes, yes, it is precisely that. The list was put together before the testimony was. And you may recall that I believe it may have even been shared with you before the testimony was, but yes, number 10 is literally just designed to say, we're going to testify on that subject.
All right, I have to confess, I haven't had a chance to review the testimony yet. I did see it come in and I looked at the revised version very briefly, but can you assure me that you and Ami will not be taking a position, at least in favor of ranked choice voting when you testify tonight?
100%, I can assure you, we are not taking a position in favor or oppose. The testimony explicitly says we are not here to testify in favor or oppose to this bill. We're just providing information. We are, and quite frankly, I'm pretty sure that if Ami and I were to give our personal opinions, which we will not, they might not be the same. So as a result, no, the whole purpose of this is just to make sure that our legislators are aware of how this could affect our work and all of our voters.
Yeah, no, specifically, Alex, the part that I am discussing in my testimony is on the logistics that would result from the logistics issues that would result from implementing it.
Well, and I think it may not come as a surprise to at least some of you. I oppose ranked choice voting on the merits, but I think, we've already seen examples of where we have difficulty with our, voters complying with instructions or understanding how, our current process works. And this is going to, in my view, make it immeasurably more complicated. And we already spend a tremendous amount of staff time, resources, other things, educating voters, trying to get them to follow the procedures and the instructions. And introducing this would make it even more difficult than it already is. So,
Alex, I'm pretty sure that if you read our testimony, you will see words that are very close to what you just said. If you leave out the part about opposing it, but if you only talk about the I have a whole section about how many of our voters already don't understand our current system, and that the outreach efforts for ranked choice voting would have to be substantial in order to be meaningful. And I did not put a price tag on it. I did not put an amount, but there would have to be a huge amount of outreach if they were to. Now, the legislation does not actually adopt ranked choice voting. It authorizes the county council to adopt ranked choice voting, and then the county council would still have to act in order for that to happen. So it's a long way from being enacted, but I'm pretty sure that when you have a chance to read the testimony, I don't remember exactly which day I sent it out, but if you have a chance to read it, I think you'll see that a lot of those issues are covered.
On
And this-
December 12th at noon.
And this would be the authorization for the county council to allow it for county-wide but not statewide elections?
Correct. That is correct. And thank you for telling me that. That would be Thursday at noon if I did my that correctly. Akina, you had your hand up.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. My colleague Alex actually shared the information that I was hoping to provide as well, that for the sake of educating the public, this would only pertain to county-wide elections, not state or federal.
And then you'd have people voting different ways for different offices on the same ballot. I mean,
Which they do now, to be fair, because we have yes/no elections. We have, for continuing judges in office.
That's true, but that's basically simple.
Well,
I mean,
we even have people, yes, no, and then they still think they can vote for more than one,
Yes,
you know.
exactly, exactly. No, people do not follow the directions today, and I would be concerned about adding more directions.
I will just, I'm going to call on you in a second, Diane, but I will just add I don't think that our elected officials have a full appreciation of how often our voters don't follow directions. But I would remind the board that we get a skewed sample because we get the cases where they don't follow directions. The vast majority follow the directions.
Yes,
And I believe that we rejected 1,000 out of 26,000 provisional ballots. That means we accepted 25,000 of them. But there's no question that again, we talked about how we want to count every eligible vote that we can count. So making a system more complicated definitely requires education for people so they can understand the system. Diane.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I hate to even ask this because we all now know I didn't see the administrative list. So let me just venture forward. I don't remember seeing
If you're asking a question about the administrative list, if it doesn't deal with number 10, I want to first dispose of number 10.
Yeah, no, let me just throw it out there. I have not seen testimony from Ami for tonight.
No, Ami's testimony is my testimony. What happened was that we changed the title. She's taking a portion of it. I'm taking I'm taking a portion of it.
Okay.
that's because of the time limit.
Thank you. I was just concerned I had missed a whole nother.
No.
Okay.
They put very strict time limits on who can talk for how long.
Got it.
David's taking the top half and I'm taking the bottom half.
Okay, thank you. That was at risk of embarrassing myself further on that one. Let me just, my last comment for number 10. I categorically oppose putting a designated explainer in a polling place. I think that this is such an overtly partisan proposal that I don't know where we would find a neutral explainer to, if somebody, let's put it this way, for the years that I've been looking into this, if somebody could explain to me how this thing works,
I'll be happy to.
I don't know where we'd find them because when you
I'll be
talk
happy to
about,
explain it.
well, the way I know how you go in and you rank people,
Right.
but I would like to know what that ranking is going to result in, and that's where it gets complicated and convoluted and almost
Okay.
impossible to understand when you throw out the highs, the lows, first of all, it's going to create ballot exhaustion. And
So may I respectfully suggest that if we want to have a longer conversation about ranked choice voting, that we do it on another occasion, because we are not proposing to support or oppose it. We are simply proposing to, and I understand what you're saying, Diane. I would say that it would be a shocking thing for Montgomery County voters if they had a question about how ranked choice voting works, and they would not, and they went to an election judge and they said, "How does this work?" And the answer was, "I'm not allowed to tell you." I think that would be absolutely shocking. I would oppose that. I think we do need designated explainers. If you want to have a bipartisan team of designated explainers like we do when we have to deal a lot with a lot of other things on election day, I am fine with that. I think that the method of voting is not itself partisan. There do seem to be partisan differences as to how people view it. And if you want to be further educated about how it works, I'm sure that can be arranged. But we are not today taking a position for or against ranked choice voting. And I did that advisedly. I knew that there would be a lot of different points of view on our board.
thanks.
Okay. So Alex, if I recall correctly, you asked a question about number 10, but you did not have a motion on number 10. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, my batting average isn't too good right now, but no, I don't have a motion on number 10. So,
Okay. So there's nothing on the floor at the moment, and we'll just proceed. Are there any other motions on the legislative list? Okay, if not, then let's move to a vote on the legislative list. If you are in favor of the legislative list, you vote aye. If you are against the legislative list, you vote no. The administrative list is not before us. Okay. So Daniel,
Aye.
Ami, you are muted.
I'm sorry, I vote aye.
Okay, Diane.
No, I can't support the whole package.
Okay, Kina,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So it passes 4-1. All right, the administrative list. It is, I guess my question. Thank you all for what we've done thus far. Oh, this is interesting. Can you all still hear me? Because my earbuds just ran out of juice. So, okay, could someone say something so I can make sure I can still hear you?
Okay, hey, I am
Same
saying,
thing.
Okay, we're good. We're good. Okay.
Now I've got to find the list. Oh, Lord.
David, can I make a suggestion?
You can make a suggestion.
I suggest that since there is far less time urgency on the administrative list, that it be postponed until the January meeting.
Oh, second.
I'm not going to consider that a motion because the president sets the agenda of the board.
Oh, I didn't realize. Sorry. Sorry, David.
But let me just say there is one thing on this list that I really want us to do right away. And that is number one. And when I say that, what I mean is that I want us to have a meeting with the Gaithersburg postmaster, like we had a meeting on the last board with the Rockville postmaster, like Ami and I had a meeting with all the postmasters, because we know that we have that second postmark, and regardless of
whether the legislation changes or not, we know that that second postmark causes problems for us. So I guess I'm going to ask, is there any objection to our starting the process of scheduling? Now, that meeting is not for the whole board because that would turn it into a public meeting and all kinds of other issues. And we don't want to embarrass anybody at the Postal Service. We just want to make sure they understand our needs and we understand theirs. Does anyone have an objection to our starting to pursue that without waiting for our January meeting? Our January meeting, as you guys may know, is scheduled for January the 27th. So it's at the end of January. I do not want to wait for the end of January to have a conversation with the Postal Service. I want to make sure it's still fresh in everybody's mind.
Okay.
Is there any objection to that? Okay, hearing none. Do others have views? I've heard from Diane and Ami. Do others have views as to whether we should postpone the administrative list?
You've heard from me, Mr. President.
Okay. Daniel or Margie or Keena, do you have a thought on this? Keena?
Yes, Mr. President. I do also agree with my colleagues that postponing this list at this time would be beneficial to those who are participating in the testimony and members of our team.
Okay. Anyone else?
We can do the
Okay.
postmaster thing separately from the rest of the list.
Right, right. That is what I'm suggesting.
Yes.
Boris knows from our prior conversations that I am very anxious for that conversation to take place.
And I absolutely
yeah,
agree with you on that point.
You know, I think that
We
you know,
lost a lot of votes that maybe should have been accepted.
yes, and they're putting us in a position where that's an issue that we really shouldn't be in.
Right.
Because there's no reason why an envelope should be postmarked at the receiving post office instead of the sending. As I understand it, that is not what the Postal Service standards call for. You know, anyway, okay. I'm okay with postponing the rest of the list until January in deference to the time. I will say that I fully expect every board member to have read the entire list long before that meeting and to have raised any questions with me that you'd like to between now and then so that we can have an efficient conversation in January. Because I've gone to a lot of effort to put this list together and to do it in advance. I sent it out, you know, last Thursday. And I'm hoping that everyone will have an opportunity to look at it. Not only that, add to it. Okay, if you have things you want to add, you have things you want to change. You know, this list is not just for me. This list is for everybody. Please do that. Keena.
Mr. President, thank you for your comments and the reminder for our duties for the next meeting. I just wanted to add in part to what I shared earlier with the suggestion to move this. I do very much appreciate the collection of observations and solutions for the next election and all those hereafter. I think in consideration of that, that is specifically why I would like this to be postponed. I think all of our colleagues have had some time to look at it. If they have not, they are hopefully also in a position to take this quite seriously, as it can very much expedite processes and procedures going forward. And so in support of that, I'm looking forward to having a very fruitful and hopefully robust conversation. To that point, I also see that since we are letting the public know that these proposals are going to be on the docket for next time, is there a way that we can also share this information more publicly outside our normal portals or avenues so that others may provide their own commentary as well?
Let's talk about that offline, because I would hate for us to postpone this in order to save time and then spend all of our time talking about how to advertise it. But I'm totally agreeable to that. There's nothing secret about it. It's, you know, it's part of our public record of this meeting.
Yes.
And I think I would like people to know what some of our issues are and some of the things that we're trying to deal with. If we can get people's interest in it, I'm all for it. But
Thank you, Mr. President.
but they would have to be, at this point, they would have to be presented as just proposals that are before us, as opposed to, and I would again remind people, this is not necessarily these are not necessarily proposals from me. I'm sure some of you recognize some of these proposals as being from you. In particular, I'm sure that Ami knows that number 15 is something that she has recommended. Number 13, we should probably call the Alan Banoff provision, because he's been suggesting that for some time. We have a number of different proposals, and we have a number of different things that have come up. Happy to engage the public on that, and we do have some time for it. So it's roughly 6 weeks until we meet again. So thank you for that, Kina. Is there any further new business? Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. The chair would entertain a motion to approve all 4 sets of minutes as amended. Kina, you had the first hand, I believe. Is your hand up because you want to make that motion?
No, Mr. President. Creating a bit
Okay.
of controversy this evening. In relation to the October meeting, there is currently some deliberation about my attendance that day. I would like to put that into record as we are trying to resolve it. There are no motions.
Are you saying that you are not listed and you were in attendance?
That is correct.
And
currently no way that we have seen so far to prove that.
Because it doesn't show on the recording?
Unless you speak, it is not a face that shows up.
Oh, wow.
Wait, unless you what? What was that, Kina?
Unless you speak.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that you were in attendance,
wow.
but you did not speak.
I
As far as I'm concerned, Kina, if you say you were there, you were there.
And Mr. President, I appreciate that you trust in the fidelity of my commentary. I also, for the record, I'm working with our colleagues to confirm that.
Yeah, and we always vote on something. It's got to be there.
That can be pulled from the Zoom records log. If you just go into the account and just look at, like, if you look at like the data, you can pull the participants and the attendees from any meeting. So just recommending that.
Thank you very much.
Boris,
We know you were there.
would you please make sure that that record is pulled?
We will follow up on this issue. I think the issue was only brought up today, so we couldn't
Correct.
really dig into that. So give us some time, we'll follow up.
Okay, so let me change then. Thank you, Kina, for letting us know. Let me change then and say that I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt the 4 sets of minutes as amended thus far, with the additional proviso that Kina's attendance on October will be, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, because I don't remember, October was, a long time ago, as far as I'm concerned. I'm perfectly happy with that being resolved by others. I want to get our minutes up on our website as soon as we can, and October was a while ago. So I do not want to wait until January to resolve this. I'd like to just say, if staff and Kina can resolve this, I'm fine with it. If the board has another idea as to how to resolve this, please feel free.
Mr. President, if Kina has told us that she was there, I'm prepared to take her word for it without any further
Yeah,
inquiry.
and you know what?
Okay.
You know what else? I just looked at my text and I texted Kina during the meeting. I can even show you guys. I say, hi there, didn't have a chance to chat in the waiting room before the meeting started recording. That was
Good enough for me.
Kina that day.
You don't
During
need to share it. Good enough for me.
There you
Okay.
go.
So it's the minutes as amended with the additional amendment that Kina is listed as attending.
Amen.
Alex.
Mr. President, one other technical correction to the September 16th board minutes on page 3 of 5. There is a reference to Miss Anna Cork requested to address the board regarding campaign sings at polling places. And I don't think she was talking about the barbershop quartet, but was intended to talk about signs, not sings.
Okay. Boris,
And even
did you
though I
get
can't
that?
vote on the minutes,
or
I felt
do I need to send you another version?
No, I just felt that even though I
Yeah.
can't vote on the minutes,
Okay.
it's of me not to point that out.
I will say that campaign sings might be fun to have, but not what you talked to us about. Okay, thank you. Any other corrections? Does someone want to make the motion to approve the minutes as we described?
Yeah,
Diane,
Mr.
Is there a
President,
second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Daniel. Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. It is unanimous. Okay, future meetings. I've only listed 3 of them, and I'll explain why in a second. The 3 future meetings being January, February, and March. As you all know, the 3rd Monday in January is a federal holiday. The 3rd Monday in February is a federal holiday. Typically, on those days, we meet on the 4th Monday, and that is what is on our schedule, is to meet on the 4th Monday in January, the 4th Monday in February, and to resume on the 3rd Monday in March. The reason I did not include April is that the 3rd Monday in April is the day after Easter. So far, 2 out of 2 board members who I consulted who celebrate Easter said that they didn't think that was a problem. But I wanted the entire board to know that if you think that our meeting on the Monday that is the day after Easter is an issue, please let me know. Otherwise, we will just assume that our meetings will be on the 3rd Mondays. It is possible that we'll make some changes over the summer period so that staff can take longer vacations because they cannot do that in even-numbered years. Stay tuned, but that's obviously, I mean, I'm not talking about before June. So, you know, we in general, we're gonna be meeting on the 3rd Monday. That's our default day. You know, but I just wanted to, you know, put that on the record. If any of you have specific scheduling concerns about any of the 3rd Mondays of 2025, please let us know. Okay, let me know as soon as you can, and we will, you know, we will proceed accordingly. Okay, now the next thing on the agenda says adjournment, but it doesn't have our list of follow-ups, which should be on the agenda. That is also
I
one that
thought
should
it
be.
was. Did
yeah,
I-
I saw it somewhere. Action items.
13, list of future action items.
Oh, it was before approval of the minutes. Oh, okay, I skipped
there you
it.
go.
I'm sorry. Okay, my bad. Future action items. I know one of them is the meeting with the postmaster. What else did we have from today that is a future action item? Boris is going to give us his presentation in January. We're going to discuss the list of administrative improvements in January. Anything else? Okay. I think the only other future action item is that everyone should enjoy the holidays. That is my future action item for all of you. Having reached the end of our agenda, this public meeting is adjourned. And I believe we received an invitation from Jerry for an executive session to follow this meeting.
Right.
David, just for the record, for compliance with the Open Meetings Act,
Yes,
board
please.
will be meeting in executive session to consider confidential voter requests.
Yep.
Yes, and that's requests plural. So,
Yes.
yes. So, okay, excellent. Thank you all very much.
Good, everyone.
See you soon.
Bye.